You know those moments when it feels like your life pivots? When the ground below you shifts and you question everything that came before? For me, that happened when I went from being the quintessential capitalist, a successful investment banker, to questioning the whole point of capitalism. Was there anything more to it than making money? More and more and more money? I'd worked my way up from nothing. Literally nothing. I was homeless for a while. And for what? I started asking myself questions like, what was I doing to make a difference? A positive difference for me, for my family, for my community, for the planet. Then I wondered whether other people in business or banking, or completely outside of it, were asking themselves these same questions too. So I left my banking job at JP Morgan. I earned a doctoral degree studying the nature of work and the responsibilities of wealth, and set out on a quest to find out if capitalism can actually be a force for good. This is What Does It Profit? And I'm your host, Dr. Dawn Carpenter. Each week in this podcast, I'll talk to some of the leading thinkers and researchers, entrepreneurs and executives about things like conscious capitalism, sustainability, and business ethics. Things that feel all the more urgent as we as a planet face enormous challenges: climate change, pandemics, and demands for social reform. Many of these challenges brought about, some would argue, by capitalism. Each episode, each guest, will bring me a little closer to finding out, what does it profit? In 2011, a judge ordered the oil company Chevron to pay billions of dollars to residents of the Ecuadorian rainforest. For decades, huge amounts of toxic waste and crude oil had been spilled into the rainforest. Experts claim that this has caused cancer and birth defects. So far, Chevron has refused to pay these victims. Among those who want to hold Chevron accountable is a surprising group, Chevron's own shareholders, who recently confronted the company demanding justice. This is what's called shareholder activism. Here's how it works. Shareholders own stock, meaning they own a part of the company. The better the company does, the better the shareholders do. But for some shareholders, doing well also means doing good. They want to see their companies supporting things like social justice, racial equality, and environmental sustainability. My guest today, Bruce Herbert, is a pioneer of shareholder activism through his company, New Ground Social Investment. And Bruce was the one behind the recent confrontation with Chevron. Bruce, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we've asked you to join us today to talk about your investment firm and the work that you're doing in shareholder activism.
New Ground is a registered investment advisor, and we're in our 26th year. And one of the things that sets us apart nationally is that we do use our rights as owners of companies to participate in shareholder engagement. And when most people first think of responsible investing, they think of it as avoiding companies who are engaged in activities that an investor might find distasteful. Well, we do that on behalf of our clients, but we also use our rights as the owners of the companies to talk to companies about improving their practices, about addressing the issues that almost inevitably will arise out of their operations. So we're in the business of transformation, of helping companies to perform better on a whole array of social and environmental and equity and justice issues, while also performing more profitably and successfully over the long haul.
Well, it sounds like this is an awful lot of engagement, but from the inside, as opposed to being an outsider kind of trying to push a company along. You're really part and parcel of the corpus of that company, trying to effectuate change from the inside.
I guess I am kind of an inside man, and I've had years and years of experience with organizations trying to push and trying to challenge from the outside, and just haven't typically found it to be as effective. We do work with a variety of different constituents in a situation. So we talk to the company, we talk to activists, we talk to academics, we talk to anyone who has a viewpoint and information, valid points of information to share about a topic or about an issue, and then we talk to companies about implementing procedures and policies that will address those things. And again, what I found over the years of more than a quarter century of doing this is that if you have a truly longer term perspective, then it's almost impossible to justify doing the wrong thing, because the wrong thing that might be beneficial in the short term from a financial perspective ends up creating liabilities and harm in the long term. And whether that's in the case of liabilities like a Superfund cleanup site, or whether it's reputational damage that then makes it hard to attract key talent or to retain qualified and motivated people. There's a whole litany of impacts that are unintended consequences of bad behavior in the long term. And almost everybody says they have a long-term perspective, but the actions of these companies often in their corporate leadership belies that. You know, their motivation, as evidenced by their pay packages, usually creates a very short-term kind of incentive.
I'd like to take some time here and talk about the most recent Chevron shareholders meeting, where there has been an ongoing dispute related to liabilities that the company has for pretty egregious environmental havoc that it's reaped in Ecuador in its oil operations. And there is tremendous cry from all kinds of activists, from environmental activists to human rights activists, who have been trying to push the company to honor its obligations. But tell us a little bit more the backstory. This has been going on for decades.
Quite some decades, back to the 50s and 60s, with Texaco, who was operating in the country, and they operated with impunity and dumped billions of gallons of highly toxic oil-related waste and sludge, which, of course, that doesn't just evaporate and go away. And so it has had a profound effect on large regions of the Ecuadorian Amazon and the people who live there. I mean, poisoning water tables and aquifers and leading to very, very high rates of cancer and other diseases and birth defects, and it's just horrific what's gone on down there. And so when Chevron purchased Texaco, when you buy the assets of a company, you also buy its liabilities, and the liabilities have taken the form of a lawsuit on behalf of the Ecuadorians that's been carried forward by lead attorney Steven Donziger, and he's done a very effective job of it. And they actually worked up. They first brought the case in the United States. But then Chevron demanded that it be held and judged down in Ecuador, presumably feeling like they, had the buy-in and could influence the outcome more directly. But it went through the Ecuadorian courts all the way to their Supreme Court, and a $9.5 billion judgment was rendered against the company. And then the company completely turned face and said, well, these are kangaroo courts down in Ecuador, and we can't trust that judicial system, so it has to be, heard back here. And it's been one thing after another in terms of legal proceedings, and the company has consistently lost and lost and lost. Before, I think it's like 29 different courts and appellate courts they have lost in hearings, important hearings on. So it's a very murky, ugly, tortured history here, but one in which, as a shareholder, I think the company has failed. I think it's failed both to make its case, and it's also failed to act and conduct itself honorably. So that's where we are today, and it's not going to be resolved quickly, but I think that it will be resolved equitably in the long haul, which is why we're trying to have that happen, calling on that to happen sooner rather than later, before more unnecessary expenditures are made.
And you have taken your cause to Chevron in this last shareholder meeting with an interesting approach. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work that you did.
So this year, because of the pandemic, COVID-19, most companies had virtual-only shareholder meetings, so everything was conducted online. And so as a result of that, it opened an opportunity where celebrities who have been for a long time interested in these issues, they were able to work with us to make presentations at the annual meeting, calling for an equitable ending is really in the best interest of everybody involved. I firmly believe that the company would be more profitable as well as more equitable, just, and sustainable by coming to a reasonable accommodation, settling this case, making some restitution and cleanup, to help the indigenous peoples down in Ecuador. Normally, a celebrity's not going to fly from New York to California and drive out somewhere to make a 2-minute presentation, but they will record a presentation that then gets presented at the annual meeting. And so this year we had Alec Baldwin.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Alec Baldwin, and I stand on behalf of New Ground Social Investment
And Nobel Peace Laureate Jody Williams.
Good morning. I'm Jody Williams, Nobel Peace Prize laureate.
And Roger Waters, co-founder of Pink Floyd.
My name is Roger Waters. I'm a musician.
All three taped presentations that we were able to present to the company and to shareholders.
Chevron's board has not protected shareholder value.
And their evocative voices and different perspectives.
Try to be a voice for the voiceless. In this case, the voiceless are 30,000 indigenous people in Ecuador.
Apparently, shareholder money and reputation is not the focus.
Really, I think over time will really help move the needle and inform people's opinions about what really is going on here.
Chevron seems like the Harvey Weinstein of petroleum companies, and shareholders should be terribly concerned about a corporate strategy that appears to depend on luck not running out.
I think that's quite extraordinary to get those three individuals. Where else would you get such disparate voices and perspectives and just like juju or karma? Go Pink Floyd.
Indeed. Pink Floyd.
I have to hear about how this came together.
Well, they actually reached out to us. They're interested, all three, in the issue and have done things in relation to it. And so they reached out and said, is there anything we can do to help? Well, golly, of course you can help. And so we had each of them record messages to the Chevron shareholders and management, and they did a superb job of it.
Tell me a little bit about what the outcome of that shareholder vote was.
Well, those votes got strong votes. Each was in the 30s, so about a third of shareholders writ large. And it's important to understand in the dynamics of voting that even a very small vote, even a single-digit vote, oftentimes can compel companies to take a different look and take a different course of action. So the key is not to get a majority vote, as nice as that is when it happens, but the key is to present a cogent argument that will play large over time. So here we have a situation that now is multiple decades in duration, and even today, they've claimed that they will fight this till hell freezes over, and then they'll fight it on the ice. Well, that could be another 2 decades longer of this kind of churning legal process at untold cost. I mean, one of the things that would be fascinating, and we actually might do something in this regard, is try to ask the company, how much have you spent? As part of one of the proceedings, they admitted to having hired 60 different law firms. I mean, the best estimate that we've seen is that they've spent a minimum of $2 billion just in legal fees, but they have done this not just in America, but in courts all around the world on multiple continents. So the mindset of avoidance is not a mindset that's very conducive to long-term success. And anything that distracts a company from the task at hand, which certainly a lawsuit of this magnitude, duration, and scope is highly, highly distracting to management teams. It takes them away from focusing on better things, plain and simple.
So does that mean we're going to see you at next year's shareholder meeting?
Oh, absolutely. And maybe Alec and Jody and Roger as well.
Well, that sounds good. Only if Roger will sing for us.
He'll sing for his supper, I'm sure.
Now, Bruce, there has been, on the flip side of all of this, voices out there who say this shareholder activism process is really detrimental to companies because they're investing a lot of money and human capital in trying to address these issues. And they say it just takes away from the value of the business. What would you say to those people?
I would say that's an utterly ridiculous and false assertion. And it's been evidenced by so many shareholder proposals that have brought tremendous benefit. It all goes back to that short-term versus long-term. And we are shareholders that have an interest in more what you might describe as stakeholder capitalism. It's not just the interest of the share owners themselves and our monetary benefit over the next quarterly earnings report in 90 days' time. It really is our interest as shareholders over the long haul, in addition to the communities, in addition to the workers, in addition to the environment and other stakeholders. If you have a thought towards sustainability, if you have a thought towards fairness, equity, and justice, these things work out better over the long haul and in a way that's also more profitable.
You know, you mentioned at the top of our conversation that you've been in business doing this kind of work for some quarter of a century. I understand you are organized as what's called a social purpose corporation. Tell us more about what that is and what it means to your business.
Yes, we were the first social purpose corporation. A social purpose corporation has to consider its obligations and responsibilities, not just to shareholders, but to the community, to the environment, and workers and so forth. And by baking that into the DNA, I think of it as the Bodhisattva vow of business. And that is, the Bodhisattva vow is that a person, if a monk attains enlightenment, he or she, the vow is that he or she will remain here on earth and help others to progress along the path. And until we all can transcend, to nirvana together. And so that's why I call it the Bodhisattva vow of business, because we really are trying to, both by example and by continuing presence in our industry and field, as well as in our communities, to serve as an example and a helping hand to others.
Well, you talk about examples. Tell us some more about some of these other campaigns you've been involved in. I understand you've done some work related to McDonald's.
We did. McDonald's, they are North America's, if not the world's largest buyer of potatoes. And so we were asked to approach them on pesticide use and pesticide reduction strategies. And so they did respond, and they realized quite quickly that we had access to important resources that could help them, largely in the person of Rich Learoff, who was a senior scientist at the World Wildlife Fund and had global awareness and experience with integrated pest management and other pesticide reduction strategies. So in short order, McDonald's actually said, we'll have a dialogue with you. They actually agreed to a pilot project for 10% of their potato supply, which is quite a large pilot project, and over the course of 1 year. And in the course of a year, less than a year actually, they realized it was working so well. And of course, anytime you reduce pesticides, you're reducing costs and inputs, and that has measurable benefit. And not even to start counting the worker health, the field workers and other things like that. And so, long story short, before the end of the year came, they said, we want to roll this out to 100% of our potato supply chain. And not only that, this took my breath away. They said, we also want to roll it out to every one of our other agricultural products, whether that's lettuce, tomatoes, onions, apples, what have you. And then they said, we don't think this should just be a McDonald's initiative. It really should be an industry-wide one. So McDonald's then became the white knight, taking this message out to their competitors and peers. Interestingly, two universities, University of Georgia and then Western Washington University, jointly were studying pesticide use during the time of the pilot project, when none of this was public. They measured a reduction in global use of pesticides just as a result of the pilot project, not having any idea where that was coming from. And so it's really quite humbling to think and to say aloud that there's not a living being on the planet of any species that is not benefiting from the steps that McDonald's has taken. Now, do I believe McDonald's is an ideal company? No, I don't. But it comes back to, I think, something that I feel quite profoundly is that companies, people, we're better. We have light and dark, and there's no such thing as a perfect company. Not surprising, because they're made up of people, and present company accepted, none of us is perfect either. And so you have to work with what you have. You have to try and improve what you see before you. And it's kind of like raising a child. You encourage the good behavior, you discourage the bad behavior. But either way, you are engaged, you're involved. We don't have the choice, either with children or with corporations, to send them back from whence they came. So we only have the option to really be a participant in the shared future that we want to see unfold.
What I'm hearing is some optimism in your voice. You think business can be a force for good?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I also have a darker aspect. Someone said it well when they said they're very optimistic about the possibilities, but pessimistic about the probabilities. So there is much good that can be done. Whether humankind will get around to doing it, well, that remains to be seen. But movements like we're seeing right now with Black Lives Matter and the protests and the awareness that that's bringing, that is a microcosm of awareness around a phenomenally important issue, albeit still one issue in a pantheon of issues that face us as a species and as a planet. But when a person opens the window or opens the door and walks through into a new awareness, it's almost impossible for that new awareness not to shine light on everything else that they've thought heretofore.
Well, that's a lot of philosophy from an investment advisor. I think this is fabulous.
Well, I did go to graduate school and study philosophy a little bit.
Hey, there you go, listeners. You can be liberal arts majors and have a business career.
Exactly. It's actually the best course.
Well, Bruce, if we have listeners out there who are either getting started in their investment career or thinking about going in that direction, I hear often this dream of making bank, as they might say, and doing well in their career. And then later in life, after they've been successful, going back and doing something philanthropically. But can you give some encouragement or advice to say that you don't have to wait until the end of your career to make an impact and do well in the investment space?
Mm-hmm. You do hear that. And I get asked that kind of question in various flavors quite often. And I think it is good to start early. Because it's difficult to be on a path for a long time and have it not turn into a rut. And so if you've been on the more kind of quote unquote corporate path, for instance, it's much more difficult to then change course down the road. I mean, the grandfather I alluded to earlier, one of the things he used to encourage us as kids, he would say, practice your eccentricities early. Don't wait until you get old and then try to, live a more interesting, robust, or quirky life. Because everybody who knows you and all the systems around you will not let you change. And we just thought that was kind of a funny thing that he said, but it actually has quite a deal of profundity to it. And so now, thankfully, there are many, many, many more ways to have a more holistic career. Because there's so many more firms now. There are even now sovereign wealth funds around the world. So if you practice your language skills, and you could even go and do something fascinating like that. And even within the bigger firms, the Morgan Stanleys and the Goldman Sachses of the world, have divisions. They have some robustness, and they also have some, light green light sort of approach or aspect to them. So you do have to think about where the commitment is and what the level and intensity of conviction is when you're assessing your career path. But thankfully, there are many more options now than there were certainly even just 5 years ago, much less 10 or 20 or 25.
So you think this is going to be the new normal?
Yes, the day is coming when responsible investment will simply be called investment, because these issues and these considerations are material. They are germane. They do have lasting impact and enduring effect on both the profitability of the company as well as the social license of a company to operate. That's a part of what I hope my legacy will be, is that there'll be broad awareness, acceptance, and actually legislative enactment of that thinking.
Now, Bruce, we find ourselves at a really interesting time in history. There's waves of activism and passion going on in society generally. Do you see this as something where a firm like yours can take a role and jump in and be additive to this? Where do you fit in?
Well, we, meaning the movement as a whole, was really founded on a basis of racial justice and equity. The first shareholder proposal was to General Motors back in the 70s related to the apartheid regime in South Africa. And now fast forward, shareholders, ourselves included, have asked many companies about increasing the diversity of representation on their boards, talking about the pay gap in both the gender as well as the racial gaps in equity and as represented by executive compensation and pay. And now we're talking to Amazon and related companies about how well they are taking care of workers in terms of COVID, but also in terms of, because the COVID is having a disproportionate effect on communities of color. So there's a variety of ways that this has been completely present in the ethos of shareholder engagement all along, and the current events are just lighting a new fire to redouble our efforts.
Well, Bruce, thank you very much for investing some time with us in this conversation today. We hope to keep the dialogue going with the links that we'll share with our audience in our show notes. And we appreciate the investment that you've made with us. And thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. And I'm so excited about the podcast that you have created and hope that it will really help us to move the needle, and appreciate what you're doing too.
This is What Does It Profit? Links related to issues we've discussed in this episode are in the show notes. Transcripts, reading lists, and lists of our friends can be found at whatdoesitprofitpodcast.com. In our next episode, a man known as the founder of the conscious capitalism movement, Raj Sisodia.
We have an uninspiring story that we've been telling ourselves about business, and that really matters. There's a much better story to be told.
In the meantime, please rate and review us wherever you're listening, and let your friends know about the show. Quick sharing links can be found on our website, whatdoesitprofitpodcast.com. We would love to hear from you. Show ideas and comments are always welcome. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter at WDIP Podcast. What Does It Profit is written and hosted by me, Dr. Dawn Carpenter. The show is produced by Josephine Holtzman and Isaac Kestenbaum at Future Projects. Executive producers are Nate Toby and Barbara Landis. Special thanks to our talented interns, Nate and Niels, and our friends at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor, Business for Impact, the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation, the DC chapter of Conscious Capitalism, and Switch and Board Studios. Before I let you go, remember, never stop asking yourself, what does it profit?